What is the pettiest thing you've seen someone fired for? I used to work at a Chili's restaurant and we used to have to roll silverware after each shift. 50 silverware rolled in napkins. No one liked to do it. Well, one day all of the servers got called into the dry storage area. The manager had found a tray of silverware that someone had hidden so we wouldn't have to roll any. I forget what the ultimatum was, but the manager was going to take it out on all of us if someone didn't confess. Finally, one guy stepped forward. I still don't think he did it, but he took the blame and was promptly fired. I saw someone get fired because they had alcohol at work. It was a gift from a vendor and they just had it in their drawer still sealed. All our sales team would receive wine, beer, liquor as gifts from vendors and some had it displayed in their office. Obviously they just didn't like this person. Sounds like he should have had it displayed. Hiding it in a drawer could be seen as alcoholic behavior. Oh, I have another one. This was a buddy of mine. Incredibly talented software developer, but a bit of a joker. My boss, who was way too serious, did not like him too much because of that. So, we have been asking for a few months for a code repository, because we had to work with shared folders and, as any developer will tell you, that is an absolutely garbage idea. Before a particular part of the project, this buddy of mine took him upon himself to create and configure the repository on a machine that we used for backup. It took him about an hour, which was on his lunch time, not on company time, and from then on, we had a proper development environment with SVN. He was fired for insubordination, for doing something beneficial to the company and crucial to the project, on his own time. Also, as a software engineer, I would love to have co-workers that did that. Please, for the love of God, think for 5 minutes what you are doing will play out for others in a few months' time. My friend got fired after 4 days because he couldn't get the VCR working so his boss's kid could watch a movie in her office. 2 girls on the very low end of the totem pole, like not even making a living wage servicing positions. One is a spiteful bee who barely does her job and takes too many days off. We'll call her Tiffany. One is a really sweet hard worker. We'll call her Mary. Tiffany and her best friend co-worker Stephanie are constantly talking crap about Mary, causing drama that keeps trickling up to middle management. One day, Mary is in the bathroom in a stall and overhears the other 2 talking crap about her behind her back again. She ends up in her manager's office in tears. It goes up the ladder to the owners. The owners decide that this needs to stop, and the best way to do that, they fire Mary. I was stuck in a position sort of similar to this. I used to work in a place where you would get punished or treated badly for speaking up about a problem in the workplace. I'd see people complain in a very civil and fair way, and soon after be given the option to put in their 2 weeks. Made no sense. One of my co-workers went on vacation and her flight back was delayed, making her late for work when she eventually got back. They essentially forced her to put in her 2 weeks on the spot. A week later, when she was too upset to go to her goodbye lunch held by her boss, she was told that day was her last day for not being a team player. My friend was fired on the 2nd week of work because an apartment building in his complex was on fire and he had no way of leaving because of the fire trucks blocking everything. He sent pictures to his boss, and when he showed up, they fired him for being late during the probationary period. Working in the heck known as a call center in West Mifflin, PA, saw one woman working, not feeling well, had no time left, so couldn't call off. Within a few hours, she had used up all of her allotted break time, 15 minutes, and her supervisor wouldn't permit her to leave the floor for the bathroom again, so she threw up all over her computer. She was fired for destruction of company property. True story. I actually was fired yesterday from my pizzeria after 5 years because I asked for 2 days off for a family event and a surprise day with my girlfriend. Obviously just said family event. I came back every summer from school and they would ask me if I could come back and help. I always did because I love the customers. After I was told no, I ended up trying to switch with someone else, like we normally would do. My boss found out, didn't like it, and fired me after 5 years. Kinda dumbfounded, to be honest. Guy got fired BC. He finally got his degree in engineering and wanted more responsibility and pay. Managers threw him in a role purposely built for him to fail without support and training. They gave him neither. Fired him when crap spiraled out of control. Caused a rift between the team and management. Over half of the team left within a year, including me. I feel for the guy. It's a monumentally crappy feeling when you can tell management is dumping more on you than any one person can handle and just waiting for it to unravel so they can fire you. I work in IT, and I had a contract job that was going to end on Friday. On Thursday evening I decided to clean up my computer profile, transfer relevant documents to our network share, and use Kalena to wipe my internet cookies etc. History. Standard protocol. I pretty much just wanted my PC fresh for the new guy. Boss walked in the room when I walked away for a bathroom break. When I returned to my desk, the laptop was gone. I was told to see the boss about it. He accused me of deleting company data and wiping my computer. He wasn't very tech savvy. I explained to him what I was actually doing and even showed him the important docs on the shared drive which he cared about. He didn't apologize but still insisted he didn't trust me anymore and that I should leave. I happily left smiling. Because the next day Friday I knew I was supposed to train the new guy on becoming the new ServiceNow administrator. My boss forgot this while we discussed and they ended up getting screwed since no knowledge transfer was ever made possible. I heard they paid a lot of money for someone else to come in and basically figure out what I had done. To be fair, they offered me a good amount of money to come back for 2 days of training, but I told them no as I already had another job lined up that following Monday. I hope this story qualifies for this topic, but I thought I'd share it. I know a girl that had this happen. She wrote the code and troubleshooted it and all that IT stuff. They sold the company, but the intellectual property was all hers. They wanted it for a song and she wasn't going to play, so they fired her. Then when the code went wonky, they wanted her to come back and fix it, and she told them to go frick themselves. About 14 years ago, I was working at a local grocery chain when I joined the military. I worked there while awaiting processing. The manager of grocery store had printed the schedule for the week, and I had just gotten my MEPS information and it conflicted with my scheduled time to work. I informed the manager that I couldn't come in as I was going to take my test, do my physical and swear in. So after I came home from that 2-day ordeal, I had a message on my answering machine that I was fired for failing to show up. Fortunately for me, my recruiter was amazing. Called him up and reamed his butt out. Pretty sure they're not even legally allowed to fire you for anything related to the military. I was fired because I was bringing the morale of the team down by taking 1.5-hour lunches every day. Okay, except that I was taking longer lunches to take my son to a medical treatment he was going through at the time. That was well agreed with my boss beforehand. I was coming in an hour earlier every day to compensate, as agreed. However, I'm glad to be honest, my boss was a huge douche with no leadership skills or a clear vision of the project. I was fired from Subway when I was 19. The dressings and sauces come in these big plastic bags, which you cut a small hole in and pour into the bottles. When you're done, you put the bag and its remnants in the fridge for the next fill up. One day before my shift, the owner brought me in the office and him and his brother had 3 half-full bags of dressing. They asked me if I threw them away, instead of putting them back in the fridge. I said no. He no clue who it was tbh. They kept accusing me of it and said we could watch the tapes to find out, so I said fine, watch the tapes. They had no tapes. They kept persisting that I did it, and when I finally just said I don't know who it was, but my shift is starting, they said they needed to know if any more bags were thrown away because they were taking it out of my check. I told them you're not doing that. They told me to leave my shirt and apron and I was being terminated. I went home and told my dad, whose first response was they fished through the trash for these bags and I gonna serve it to the customers, so he called them and threatened to contact the Board of Health. They apologized profusely, and I went the next day and got my last check. I'm 90% sure in Massachusetts to terminate someone you have to hand them their final paycheck at the moment of termination. Either way, frick Subway. I would have called the Board of Health, not called them and threatened to. I was dismissed from a firm after 2 days because a guy who hired me didn't like the hockey team shirt I had on. Ended up taking the firm to court and won a large settlement. Stupid kid. He ended up getting fired. Saw on his LinkedIn page. What team is it? I was once fired from a job because I was asked to create this bull's intake form on Microsoft Word and my boss claimed that I didn't do it. I was genuinely confused, and even though I was 1,000,000% certain that I indeed sent it properly, I said maybe I forgot to attach the file. Boss said we can't have that kind of forgetfulness here and told me to go clean out my desk. As I'm cleaning things out, I open my email, pull up the original sent email that included the file he claimed I never sent, and forwarded the original email and reattached the same file. I included the date and the file name too. To the boss who just fired me, I forgot exactly what I wrote, but it was something along the lines of "Thank you for the opportunity. Here is the file you requested." As I'm cleaning out my desk, the assistant director, who was so busy in his own work that he didn't notice I was being fired at that very moment, confusedly asks Womilkerson, "Why did you send us the same file twice?" I didn't know whether to facepalm or explode in a fit of rage. My ex got fired because of mayonnaise. She was a middle management type at our local NPR station. Had been there for a few years. New station manager got hired, and the guy hated mayonnaise. Viscerally. He banned it from the employee refrigerator. She had a mini fridge in her office, so everybody started storing their mayo in there. He saw it one day during a meeting in her office, started screaming at her, accusing her of belittling him, and fired her on the spot. She was well compensated in arbitration, but she still lost her dream job, all the same. Happened to me in an internship. You talked to my wife yesterday. She said you're cute. Get your stuff and frick off. Well, okay, I'm 16 and your wife is like 50, but more free time until summer holidays end. Not going to argue with you. I had worked as a leasing consultant for a very well-known apartment rental company 12 years ago. My schedule start time changed daily, weekly, and it was not uncommon to work 9 days in a row, so it could be exhausting. The office switched to using a fingerprint punch-in clock when you start your shift, and if you missed it you had to fill out a time card sheet. So I missed a punch-in one morning and filled out a sheet a few days later. I wrote my start time as 8 o'clock, but it was really 9:00, so the assistant manager called me asking about it the day before we put in our time cards for pay, and I said my mistake, it was in fact 9. Let me know if you need me to come into the office and correct it. She said no problem. 2 hours later she calls me again but sounds strange and asks why I wrote down 8 o'clock. I said I was confused because the rest of the week had been 8 o'clock, but again no problem if you need me to correct. I was told no, that is fine. Turns out the manager was on the other line, who hated me, and they tried to get me to say something that would fire me. I did not, however. I was fired for trying to steal 1 hour of pay. After I got fired I filed for unemployment and actually got it, because when the unemployment office called the manager to get her story she never returned the call. Jump to me at a new job 2 months later and I get a court notice that my old boss and company is taking me to unemployment insurance court because they want to dispute the 1 month I collected unemployment. So I go and they have a corporate lawyer, the HR person, the assistant manager, and manager against me. We sit in front of a judge who hears our case and I provide my side of the story showing how much the start times change, etc. They provide their side and the judge goes okay, so the employee was fired for taking 1 extra hour of pay. I interject and say, Your Honor, I never received the pay for that hour. He asks what do I mean. I tell him the problem was caught before the timesheets went in. He rubs his face and says, so why are we even here? My old boss says because he tried to steal an hour. The judge goes, I heard enough. You will get my judgment via letter. The session is over. He ruled in my favor, so I got to keep that 1 month of pay and the money they wasted on the lawyer, the HR women, and getting people to cover that property while the managers had to go to court probably cost more than the money they were fighting me for equals d. Frick them. As someone who has worked jobs that span hours during first, second and third shift in a single week, and at times within all 3 of those shifts in a single 24-hour period, thank you. I was let go after 2 years for not being a cultural fit for the company. I worked in the accounting department. This came after I had a big deadline coming up and I opted to stay behind and work. Rather than going to a co-worker's birthday lunch, my supervisor forced me to go anyway, which took 2 hours and I was unable to meet my deadline. A few weeks later, I transferred someone over to their correct associate in the department and she started screaming at me in front of her supervisor and my supervisor, telling me I wasn't a team player, that I should have taken the call even though it wasn't my region. After that, the same morning the department manager calls me in and says it just seems like you put your work before people. Therefore we don't feel like you're a cultural fit. She literally meant because I opted to work as opposed to socializing that I was being let go. Oh, but they still wanted me to stick around to finish the financial quarter to help keep their numbers up. I agreed under the condition I get my full bonus for that quarter. Months after you leave, I just can't figure out why we aren't as profitable as we were before. I got fired once for calling in sick. I called in to tell my boss that I was too sick to work, so she had me calling around to find a replacement. No one answered, but I was sick, so I called her back and told her. She said okay. I show up the next day, I had work and everything is fine. She doesn't say anything. 2 weeks later we get a schedule and I'm not on it. She's not in because she's on vacation, so I ask her assistant. She has no idea and tells me to just wait for the manager to come back. Being a dumb 19-year-old, I do. So another 2 weeks later I'm still not on schedule and she's back but avoiding. Like if I ask for her, no one can find her. Finally she got sick of avoiding me a couple days later and gives me a meeting with her and the store manager. I'm fired for no call, no show. I ask her what the frick she's talking about and she says I haven't shown up for a month of work. I tell the store manager that I wasn't scheduled and I could tell it threw him off a bit. But the manager keeps insisting I just didn't show and that I need to sign this paper saying I'm fired for not showing. Ultimately I did because a game dumb 19-year-old. I found out later from a friend that worked in a different department she did this because that day I called in sick. She had to work on her day off. She fricked me out of a job because she had to work on her day off as a manager. No way I'm signing that paper, and I'm suing for wrongful termination. Course, we would probably all make that same decision as a 19-year-old. A friend of mine took a bunch of time off because his father was dying of cancer. Him and his father were incredibly close. Our job put him on call indefinitely because he took too much time off. I still get really mad just thinking about it. In the 80s, I worked at a grocery called Schnucks. Management was obsessed with shrink and became crazy with employees eating damages or anything in the bakery. Some guy was fired for eating a few M&Ms from the cookie area. Another was fired for eating an old glazed donut. Instead of quitting with notice to leave for college or whatever, people started eating donuts in front of management and being fired on the spot. Quitting became eating the donut. That's hilarious. I used to work there, although I think it was smoking pot while collecting carts that did me in. Myself, I had worked there for a while, and finally the parent company started moving in and taking over. I was staunchly against the change, since I spent hundreds of hours rebuilding their IT infrastructure from scratch, only to have it ripped out and replaced with stuff I wasn't trained on. The actual infraction was pretty laughable. A boss was with some employees at a bar after work. Apparently she got in a fight with one of the employees, fired her, and confiscated her laptop. She gave it to the other employee and told him to use it to work from home the next day. Of course, that didn't work. He didn't even have rights on the VPN. She called me into her office to berate me because my technology didn't do what she thought it did. I was sick of kowtowing, and just straight up told her she can't reassign hardware without clearing it with me. I was her peer in the org chart. It wasn't insubordinance. Still, I got fired for not fixing a problem I didn't know existed. Had a friend who worked for a steel fabricators as an apprentice. However, he had decided that he was better suited to a future in the Navy. He had been given a start date for basic training, and around 2 months before, he had to hit the emergency stop button on his steel press because it had loaded in the steel incorrectly. That's why the emergency stop button exists. Afterwards, he would have to take some time out to reset the machine and record the incident. Anyway, someone had blabbed to his management that he was leaving to go join the Navy a few months later. So they sacked him for what they found was a disregard for personal safety, because he had to stop his machine. A guy I know worked at a factory and came in while he was off the clock to talk to a co-worker of his. He made the mistake of wearing a wife beater which showed his array of tattoos covering his body, so he got fired the next day for making the company look unprofessional. Not switching gloves when switching from the big burger patties to the small ones. He was fired for cross-contaminating. The patties came from the same manufacturer and packager, same ingredients and everything, just different sizes. That's just a petty manager who would have fired him for something that day. One of my dad's co-workers took a 2-week vacation, scheduled it all out. The company has people bid for their vacation based on seniority every November, so it's not like he just took off at random. When the co-worker didn't come back after the first week, his manager thought he was skipping work and fired him after he didn't show up for 5 days in a row. He showed up when he was actually scheduled to work after his vacation was over, and the manager got a wrist slap and HR had a nightmare of paperwork to deal with reinstating the guy, who went on to steal a truckload of computers several years later and get fired for real. I wonder if he would have stolen the truck, regardless of whether or not your piece of crap manager fired him. It was my coworker. First, a little background. This place was a crap show. We usually worked an extra 3-5 hours overtime for free a day. We got sick of it and demanded we get proper pay for our work. While administration was working it out, they told us to stop working overtime. They drilled it into our heads. When it's time to leave, leave. Drop what you're doing and go home. Fast forward a week. It was 10 minutes after our shift ends and this one guy walks in and asks for a tour. Now, we never seen this guy before, but we know he doesn't work here. It's a small place. So my co-worker politely declines, explains that we're closed, and offers a tour tomorrow. This guy goes ape crap and storms off. The next day the head guy in waiting for us to show up, and he fires my co-worker on the spot. Turns out that random guy was a high-paying donor and practically paid for the building. We didn't know that. The guy never said that. From our part, this random guy came in and wanted a tour. Happens more often than you'd think. The co-worker didn't get a chance to explain himself. Just fired. I quit shortly after. Shows up after hours, asks for a tour. Yeah, I'd have thought he was trying to rob the place. I don't know about petty, but this is funny. A guy I worked with applied for a new job while on company time. A few minutes later he got an out of office reply from the person he sent his resume to. It was our boss, who was out of town but had posted a job opening to eventually replace the guy who was looking for a new job. He should have said, "I'll take it," then stole an identity and live out his life as somebody else. A former boss of mine tried to get me fired when I turned down his sexual advances. I mean, I was flattered, but I'm married, and a man, and not gay. Wow, this was a roller coaster from start to finish. Years ago I was fired from Pizza Hut. I was a shift manager and there was really bad tornado activity one night. An employee was freaking out because we're from the Midwest and she lost her friend to a tornado recently. I called the store manager and she said to close and go take shelter. Luckily my house had a basement and was a few blocks away. 20-30 minutes later, sirens stopped and we went back. Trees were uprooted all over the road and glass was broken near the drive-through window. We were soaking wet from the rain. When we got back, online orders had been coming through like crazy and there were only 3 of us. My server was shivering and I told her she could change into basketball shorts that were in her car. Anyone from the Midwest knows after tornadoes everyone goes out to look at the damage. We got slammed, and to make matters worse, a man gave us 10-minute notice that there would be a party of 30 coming. This was a Monday night with 3 employees. We spent hours after close trying to get caught up but finally left. Next day, I get a phone call from the store manager. I come in and she says she had no control over this and she was going to have to let me go because she received 2 calls about a server wearing shorts and not black pants. I explained the situation and she started crying saying it was over her head. Plot twist, I later figured out the real reason I was let go was because I reported an incident to district manager involving an employee throwing a metal crock pot full of ranch at an angry customer. It missed the customer but I had to clean it, and the customer was upset, and the employee was sleeping with the store manager that fired me. Store manager was later terminated for having relations with this employee in the office while on the clock, and also stealing thousands of dollars over the years. My husband was asked to do an interview to go from temp to full-time. A couple of his co-workers got jealous. They trashed his equipment while he was on break. The whole thing was caught on camera, but they still fired him for not being a team player. What the frick? I worked at a bookstore that had a cafe in it. We all got free coffee in the beginning. Then as the company started to fail, they took that away and we had to pay like 45 cents and also for the milk and our coffee. The top brass came down hard one day and questioned everyone on if they paid for the milk and their coffee. Everyone didn't but said they did, except one honest fellow. He was an exchange student from China and was the nicest kid you'd ever meet. Worked really hard, and they fired him on the spot for stealing milk. It was over our boss's head and everyone was so upset. A very energetic dude on the service desk decided to show his manager how they get through night shifts when the phone isn't ringing, etc. He was fired the same day. Don't show your boss movies. Glad leadership never saw me playing Battlefield all night to keep my eyes open on night shift. Don't show your boss movies. People like this get fired because they are too stupid to cover their boss's butt. Of course, employees are going to have downtime. But the last thing you want is an employee who advertises his unproductive activities to other people. Today, it's the boss. Tomorrow, the boss's boss. Not cool. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.